On YouTube, A Crown, the Three Range Bros council member, is the creator of The Author's Crown. These are his stories.
Hello everyone, welcome to The Author's Crown. My name is A Crown. In this channel I will present to you stories written by both myself and occasionally stories written by good friends of mine. So without further ado, let's get the show started. The hooded figure sits on his throne made of smooth stone. With a wave of his armored hand, an image appeared before him. He watched as the armored riders defeated both his Voorhees horror and the Cenobite horrors. He slams his fist down, cracking the arm of his throne. He waved his hand again, this time angrily, as a shapeless blob of ooze hovered in the air as he melded it. Finally decides on a shape that pushes it through an image of Voluminous City. His evil laugh can be heard in the background. Meanwhile, in Voluminous City, Lee and Julian were both standing in Ellen's shop. Lee was watching an episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! On her phone while Julian was reading an older issue Detective Comics. Ellen activated the button for the lair as she told the pair, "You two keep an eye on things while I'm working on something for the drivers." Lee gave Ellen a thumbs up while Julian said, "Will do, Ellen." As they returned to what they were doing, Julian asked Lee, "Can you head to the back and grab a room?" Lee continued watching, completely ignoring his question. Julian waved his hand and then repeated it, but still got no answer. He then walked up and pulled the headphone out of Lee's ear. She snapped and said, "What the hell, dude?" Julian responded, "I was trying to get your attention. Someone needs to sweep." "Then go get the broom and sweep," Lee said. "You could have just said no. You don't need to be so snappy," Julian responded. Lee then said, "Listen, let's get one thing straight. Just because we're both riders doesn't mean we have to get along." "Fine, you don't need to be a jerk about it," Julian said as he walked out of the room. Lee stepped outside as she put her headphones back in her ear. She looked up at the sky as she thought about her grandfather. Julian walked back in with the broom as he looked at Lee. He swept up before returning back behind the counter to read his comic. Ellen, meanwhile, watched the two on camera as she said to herself, "Joe Fang, this girl of yours definitely has your attitude." She looked over at a few books nearby, then waved her hand, and some transformation books appeared with Lee's names on them: Aquaman, Hawkeye, Pokemon, and Soul Eater. As she was working with them, an alarm blared in the lair. Julian and Lee heard it on their earpieces and grabbed their drivers from behind the counter. They shared a scowling look at each other before running out of the store. Ellen spoke over the comm, saying, "It's by the park." Julian ran over and slid across the hood of his car. He climbed in and then reached out the window and asked Lee, "You want to ride with me?" She looked at him and then headed over to her bike. She hopped on, putting her helmet on. She started and sped off towards the park. Julian shook his head and sighed as he took off towards the park as well. Lee arrived at the park, and only a few minutes later, after her, arrived Julian. They looked out into the park and seen multiple horrors running about. The creatures walked on all fours and had grayish, armored-like skin. They charged at everyone that was running and screaming. Julian said, "Let's do it." Lee says, "Yeah." They both pulled their drivers from their vehicles and placed them at their waist. Both the drivers said, "Issue driver!" The two then pulled out their transformation books and pressed the buttons. Julian's said, "Superman," and "Captain America." Lee said, "Naruto," and "Bleach." Julian spun his and Lee flipped hers. They put the books in and the drivers both said, "Comic book open," and "Manga open." The melody began on both drivers, and after a few moments, the music stopped. They swiped their hands in front of the driver's sensors and took their poses, yelling, "Henshin!" Light erupted from both Julian's and Lee's drivers. His said, "Comic book hero," and hers said, "Manga hero." They were both transformed, and as the lights dissipated, Manga heroine said, "Let's take these things down." She charged as Comic hero said, "Wait, we need to make a plan. We don't know what these things are." It fell on deaf ears as Manga heroine charged at the creature's sword at the ready. She leapt into the air and swung it, striking the creature. To her shock, it had no effect. Kamakiro ran up and pulled Lee out of the way of the other creature's attack. "Let me go," she said, pulling away from Kamakiro. He tried to stop her as she charged again, this time pressing the Leaf Village symbol on her sword. Her shadow clones appeared beside her, and they all swung their swords at the same creature, but it had no effect either. The clones hopped back and started building up what the manga/anime called Rasengan. Kamakiro saw the other creature charging towards her. He laser visited it and threw his shield at it. The distraction caused it to charge towards him. Kamakiro was barely able to hold it back. He built up all of his strength and threw it into the air. It flew off out of sight, unknown to him, landing in the ocean. He took off into the air to look for it. He flew towards around where he sent it, but as he got closer, he noticed that it didn't come out of the water. Back in the park, manga heroine's clones charged at the creature with their Rasengan, while she changed her blade into the Zanpakuto. She charged with the powerful Bankai attack. All three strikes hit, but the only effect they had was scaring the creature off into the woods. As it did, manga heroine noticed it ran past a child that was frozen in fear, making no noise. After arriving back in the park, Kamakiro contacted Ellen, saying, "The horrors are both gone, but we need to talk. I think these particular ones are going to come back." "Okay, come back to the lair and we'll talk it out," she said. Julian stormed into the lair alongside Lee and turned around and yelled at her, "What the hell happened out there? We're supposed to be a team." Lee snapped back, "I was trying to kill that thing. It's part of the job, remember?" Julian responded, "Okay, but we should have made a plan, figured out their weaknesses. If we could have saved some lives out there, instead of wasting our energy on attacks that did nothing." Lee yelled, "Okay, so I made a mistake. Big deal." Julian responded, "The big deal is we're a team. You just ran off without waiting for me. What would have happened if that thing had taken you out?" Lee answered, "Then I would have died a hero. You don't know anything about me or what I've lost. I lost the person I loved most in this world. You didn't have anyone to begin with." Ellen interjected, "Okay, enough of this, you two. This city needs you to be on the same page. Vangorius is going to keep sending horrors, and if he finds out about the divide between you two, he will use it to his advantage." Julie and Lee stared at each other before turning back towards Ellen. Lee said, "I'm sorry, Julian. That went too far. That was mean of me." Julian responded, "That's okay. You're right. I don't know what it's like to lose something I never had, but I understand that you're going through pain. I just want us to work together and help the people who are depending on us." Lee solemnly says, "Okay, fair point. I'm sorry again. Let's give Fangorius and his horrors the true potential of Team Kamen Rider," she said, holding out her fist. "Let's do it," Julian says as they fist bump. The alarms blared again as Ellen started typing on the console. On the screen appeared more of the same horrors. She says, "Looks like you'll get your chance. More of those nigh indestructible things." Lee looked at Julian and said, "What's the plan?" Julian watched the creature and says, "So its armor blocks pretty much any attack, but I noticed something. The one I fought, when I sent it flying into the water, it didn't resurface. Maybe it can't swim or is too dense to swim in the deep water." Lee asked, "So we throw them in the water?" Julian responds, "Maybe, but we can't just depend on that." Lee watched the camera. She notices one of them doesn't attack a family trying to hide, even though they're clearly visible to it. Lee said, "You said they had no eyes, right?" Julian answers, "Yeah." Lee then says, "Maybe they hunt by sound. I saw it completely avoid this kid at the park who was standing quietly." She points to the screen at the family saying, "And it just avoided that family there being quiet." Ellen says, "That's brilliant. I've got a new transformation book for each of you that's perfect for just such this occasion." She holds up the 2 books she was working on earlier, and the heroes take them. She returns back to the console and says, "They're downtown, but maybe you can draw them towards the ocean." "Yes, ma'am, we're on it," Julian says. "You can count on us, Ellen," Lee adds in. They run to the elevator as Ellen says, "Good luck." They both give a thumbs up as the elevator closes. A few moments later, they arrive downtown as the monsters are rampaging. The 2 pull out their drivers and put them on their waists. "Issue driver," both drivers say. Julian presses the buttons on his new transformation book, which says Aquaman and Hawkeye. Lee does the same in her book, says Pokemon and Soul Leader. They go through their motions, placing the books in the drivers, and the drivers say, comic book open and manga open. The music plays and then stops as the heroes perform their movements and say, Henshin! Then Julian's driver says, comic book hero, and there's a orange and green figure, as well as a black and purple figure, fly around him. And then land. Julian is covered in armor that is orange with purple accents on top, and black with green accents on bottom. In his right hand appears a gold trident, and on his left appears a crossbow. A quiver then forms on his back as an orange and purple helmet covers his head. Elise says, manga heroine, as two forms fly around her, one in the shape of a ball that's red and white, the other black, white, and yellow in the shape of a scythe. Her new armor is black with yellow, red, and white accents. On her sword appears a scythe and a ball. Comic hero and looks at manga heroine and says, you ready? She responds, let's do it. Comic hero then says, okay, so let's use sound-based attacks to draw them towards the ocean. And manga heroine adds in, then vanish them off with final attacks and send them deep into the ocean. Comic hero answers, right. He puts his trident on his back and pulls out an arrow, loading it into his crossbow. He fires it just past the first creature. It explodes, drawing its attention in that direction. Comic hero runs and gets in front of it, continuing to fire different arrows, causing sound, drawing the creature towards them. Manga heroine then gets in front of her target, hitting the scythe icon on her sword, changing it into a scythe with a piano for a blade. She uses the knowledge of piano playing that's now in her brain to lure the creature to follow her. After continuing to do this, they lure both creatures closer to the ocean. As they finally arrive on the docks, the two get ready to attack the horrors, when a screaming civilian draws one of the creature's attention. Comic hero dives in front of them, blocking the creature's attack and getting knocked through the dock's barrier into the water. Turning to try and help, manga heroine says, Comic! This draws the other horror's attention, which knocks her through a building, which begins to crumble and fall around her. As it does, manga heroine has a memory flash of her grandfather teaching her. In the memory, her grandfather says, when fighting to protect someone who can't protect themselves, they're depending on you, so you must never give up. Always show your opponent that strength comes from never giving up and always fighting for what's right. This inspires manga heroine to get out of the rubble. She turns and yells at the creature, I am not done yet! As the creatures turn back towards her, manga heroine hits the ball on her sword, which pulls up a list of Pokemon for her to use. She scrolls through and selects Zubat. The Pokemon appears before her, and manga heroine begins to screech very loudly like the Pokemon to disorient the monsters. Deep down in the water, everything begins to go dark around Comic Hero. As it does, he can hear a voice said from the darkness saying, I love you, Julian. I'm sorry. This sudden loving memory stirs something inside of him, and Comic Hero pulls the trident off of his back, giving him the power to swim like the king of Atlantis. As he swims, the creatures of the sea swarm around him. He rapidly goes upwards and bursts through the surface of the water into the air, landing on the dock, just on the other side of the creatures. Manga heroine looks over at him and says, You alright, partner? He responds, Yeah, let's do this. He charges, swinging his trident wildly, striking one, even though it has no effect. The clanging of the weapon against the horror's armored skin drives the creature back towards the dock. Manga heroine selects another Pokemon, this one Jigglypuff. She begins to play metronome, which dizzies the one monster chasing it to fall back a bit. As the two horrors roar, Comic Hero shortens the trident and loads it into his crossbow. Manga heroine presses both buttons on her scythe and begins to use an Arcanine's roar combined with the notes from the piano playing on the weapon. The creatures fall into the water but don't sink. Manga heroine says, We need to send them deeper. Right, Comic Hero says as he sends telepathic waves to the creatures of the ocean. Manga heroine summons the powers of a Blastoise and fires powerful jet streams from her sword, pushing the creatures down as Comic Hero's sea animals pull the horrors deep down into the dark of the lower ocean. Manga and Comic high-five each other and walk off down the street towards Ellen's. A few moments later, after arriving unarmored at Ellen's shop, The two greet Ellen, who says, "Great work." Lee and Julian both say, "Thanks." She hugs them, and Julian tells Ellen and Lee about the voice he heard in the water. Ellen says, "Maybe you did have someone who loved you. We will definitely help you search for them." Lee adds in, "Definitely. I may have lost my grandfather, but he always said family is the most important thing. So if I can help you find yours, I can make up for what I said to you earlier." "Thank you both. I just hope they're still out there," he says as he looks out the window towards the sunset, alongside Lee, who puts her hand on his back. And that's the story for today. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you like what you heard today, stay tuned for some awesome things to check out on the Zero to Hero Network. And thank you for listening to The Author's Crown.
My name is Ace, and I use a device called the Color Matrix, which allows me to hijack alternative universe versions of myself. I have the multiverse at my disposal. From being a Power Ranger, to being a Spider-Man, to piloting the Orville, to being a Vampire Slayer. I can do it all. I can spend 8 hours of my time. Of course, time is different in each universe, but 8 hours of my time piloting a version of myself. So come, explore the multiverse with me. See what my world is like in different universes. Explore the multiverse. If you want to hear such stories, then come and listen to The Color Matrix on Tiger Tales, The Lost Stories, found on YouTube.
Do you enjoy podcasts? Do you enjoy listening to two brothers arguing and rambling about a specific topic? Then Zero to Hero is the podcast for you. Listen to them nerd out about anything from Power Rangers to crippling toy addictions to computer stuff for the low price of free. But hurry, this deal will only last for an unlimited time, so subscribe now. Insignificant humans, my name is Golda, servant of the great and powerful Empress Rita Repulsa. She has commanded me to tell you to go listen to the adaptation of Boom Comics' Power Rangers on Nerds Throw Comics. Now, do as she commands, or be destroyed.